you could just quickly explain who Last FM are and what you guys are doing, if anyone doesn't already know.
Yeah, so Last FM is a Web 2.0 social music site. So we have social networking, music streaming, artist charts, music charts, a lot of dynamically generated information is customized to each user. Okay. All about music, basically.
And from what we were talking about, so what you were talking about tonight was all about scaling, scalability, growing, because you guys have become quite successful and quite busy. From a fundamental starting point for people who are really just getting started, so they've had an idea or they're just building their application, what are the core fundamentals that they really need to think about from the beginning, from your thoughts?
Think about scaling at the beginning, not when you have a problem. It's most important to actually plan for scaling. So you should assume that you're going to need to scale sooner or later. You should build this into your application from day one, so you should start thinking about how you will scale that up when you hit bottlenecks. Build in the hooks into your application so that you can easily add scalable features later. Separate different components so that you can scale out across different machines. It's a lot cheaper to scale out than it is to scale vertically upwards. You'll always hit...
And so scaling, when you say scaling out, you mean adding more machines rather than adding...
Yeah, scale horizontally, so add capacity across larger numbers of lower cost machines rather than trying to buy one really expensive machine and then waiting until you hit the capacity load on that and then looking for something more expensive again.
And what about core strategies to do that scaling?
Well, every website and every workload is going to be a bit different, so you need to look at where your bottlenecks are and how you're going to manage those bottlenecks. So if you're CPU bound, then you can look at load balancing across large numbers of machines, look at multi-core systems, look at multi-threaded systems, etc. If you're database bound, then you need to look at sharding your data, at replicating it, dealing with I/O loads, and managing things within the acceptable sort of response time. So it very much depends on your workload, but for whichever area is a bottleneck, there are different strategies for dealing with it.
Okay, so from a basic level, just separating out all the initial components like web, database, really...
Yeah. When you're not dealing with very much traffic, when you haven't got a heavy load, then one machine can easily manage everything. But as soon as you start to push that capacity, you're going to find that you want to separate workloads onto different servers. So your database server, you want it to be I/O balanced with specified to deal specifically with that. Your web servers, you're going to want to have more CPU, more memory. Other layers of infrastructure like your load balancers, maybe static content serving, you might want to separate out onto different things, and then you can use caching layers at various points in your architecture to speed things up.
People do talk and constantly bring up caching as a very important part. How fundamental has it been in what you've been doing?
Caching is critical to what we do. If we didn't have the layers of caching we've got, we couldn't serve the site. All of our content goes through several layers of cache in various places. So if we can cache it, we do. So you will only hit the database if it's a query that hasn't been previously cached, and only for stuff that genuinely requires database hit.
And what are some of the unique challenges that you've faced, which probably maybe not other people would have faced, or ones that have really sort of had a big problem for you guys, but you've actually managed to find the solution eventually?
We've had very strong growth because we're dealing with streaming music. We do an awful lot of bandwidth, so we've had a number of challenges with the network in terms of dealing with capacity, making sure there are no bottlenecks in the physical architecture, balancing across providers and trying to make it redundant in that sense. Also, because we've got a large amount of content, we've got storage challenges with how to manage that storage and grow it so that it performs at an acceptable level without it costing a fortune. So we've used MogRFS and a number of other bits of custom software that we develop internally to deal with balancing users across a large number of disks.
Storage is an interesting one actually, because people find that if they're dealing with large amounts of data, they're not sure whether to deal with it in-house or just put it out on S3 or where to do it. I mean, what made the decision for you guys to take it in-house rather than just put it all out?
S3 didn't exist when we started doing it, so it was a very easy decision. Now it might be a little trickier, but as soon as you start to do significant amounts of traffic and you're moving that data around a lot, then S3 starts to get quite expensive. So I think S3 is a good option if you're starting up. There's probably going to come a point at which you're going to outgrow S3, not from a capacity perspective, but from a cost effectiveness perspective.
Okay, and one of the questions that I get asked on a regular basis by people is how they can have multi-data center redundancy. Do you think that's important for people to think about, even sort of mid-stage, or is that just really overgunning?
Every data center I've ever had kit in has failed, so from that perspective, yes, it's important. They all break sooner or later. It depends how important your uptime is and whether your site can tolerate a period of outage while the data center has problems. Also, there's lots of aspects to a data center that can cause issues. So it's not the first thing to look at, but it's definitely something to look at as you move down the line. You're never going to achieve 5 nines of uptime if you're dependent on the data center provider, because one outage in a year is going to completely screw your statistics on that front.
And do you guys virtualize anything, or is it just key components are...
We virtualize only where we're doing development, because most of our services require more capacity than we can provision on a single machine, so virtualizing doesn't really gain us anything. For development, it's handy.
And as you've been doing your development, how have you made sure that all your teams have been keeping together and keeping the scaling on target rather than just bundling sort of poor groups of code?
Testing, capacity planning and measurement basically. And it doesn't always work perfectly, but it's with an architecture the size that we're running, it's quite obvious very quickly if somebody's put out a change that is having an adverse effect on performance. So the ability to keep a very close eye on things when you push changes out and to roll back quickly if you need to.
Okay. And could you just quickly at the tip finish off, run through a few of the tools that you guys use on your caching, on your file systems, and just the core ones that you guys rely on?
We're a fairly standard LAMP stack. It's Apache PHP. Caching is all done in Memcache. There are certain application level caches like the APC PHP cache and other application specific caches we use, but Memcache is the bulk of the caching layer. And databases, our main database is PostgreSQL. Other things that we use for file systems, we're heavy users of MogILFS. For offline data processing, we also use Hadoop, which is the open source implementation of Google's MapReduce algorithms. Okay. And just to finish off, how do you convey to the more management, more business people within your organisation the scaling side of things? How does that conversation go? If you've got adequate monitoring in place and capacity planning, then it's fairly straightforward because you have a good idea of how many users you can support on the current hardware, and you can predict your growth curve, so you can communicate fairly clearly to the business side when you're going to run out of capacity, how much the next lot is going to cost and what the business benefit of that is. And it's then up to people on the business side to decide which features they want to prioritise and what areas they would like to spend the money in.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Mike. Well, thank you very much.